Thank you so much, Lauren, for the invitation. And it's just so good to be with all of you all and engage in this topic. I think sometimes we think cultivating healthy relationships at work just kind of happen. But we know that that's not true, that it's not accidental. It is much more of an intentional practice that we can engage in. And so I just want to really give some real practical tips, and I want to ask some questions as well. So I want to invite you to feel free to take yourself off mute, or Lauren's going to help me to see the chat if you prefer to populate the chat, but you're welcome to either of those will work just fine. Hopefully I am sharing my screen. Is that true, Lauren? Am I sharing?
Great. Looks great.
Perfect. So I want to start here when we think about, I think I've advanced the screen. Healthy workplace relationships. I'm wondering if you can share one word that describes a positive workplace relationship you've had. And I really want to know, like, why? Oh, trust. I just saw that pop up. Um, Collaboration, respect, it's supportive, caring, genuine, the humanity of it. It's humorous. You got some humor, grace, integrity, appreciative, authentic. These are really great words. Safe, communication comes up a lot. Invested. Ooh, y'all are doing great. Thank you for all of these words. Keep them coming in. I'm interested if anyone wants to take themselves off of mute, and to hear why some of these things come up for you. Humility, I see as well, and flexibility, shared values. These are so rich. Healthy workplace relationships really are built on a foundation of all of these things that you mentioned, the trust, the collaboration, and psychological safety comes up as well. Did I see someone raise their hand, Lauren? No? Okay, great. Well, continue to think about these things that you're building up as foundational bedrocks. And I want you to take them along with us as we continue our conversation, as we'll continue to build in this space on all of the things that you talked about. But I want to talk about something that might be a little bit surprising when we talk about relationships. We kind of we skip a step. So I'm going to take us back. Foundations of healthy relationships. It's you. The substrata of every relationship is you. Like, right? You've got to be good, and you've got to be able to kind of keep yourself in check. And oftentimes I find that when we lack emotional intelligence, that's really what can deteriorate relationships really very quickly. And so I start here with emotional intelligence just as a reminder for us. These are things we look for, but we also look to give them, right? In relationship to others. As I looked at your list, humility, grace, trust, collaboration, respect, all of those things. Daniel Goleman talks about emotional intelligence, right? And gives us 5 competencies for emotional intelligence. The first 3 are inward, kind of internal facing competencies, and the other 2, he calls those external competencies. But when we think about in relationship to others and how we create healthy relationships, the first thing is being self-aware, right? when we are self-aware, that just means that we are noticing. Have you ever had someone walk in a room and they may have missed any, environmental clues, and they just are going on, right? And you're like, read the room, right? And that's really difficult to navigate. And so one of the things that I want to invite you to do is to notice, pick up those context clues, kind of see, right? When you come in the morning, one of the basis things that I will do is speak to folk. Right? You want to create those healthy relationships. So you want to be known as someone who is open and inviting, engaging. But you also want to temper that. If you're a morning person, but the rest of your folks are not a morning person, you don't want to come in over the top, right? And so you may have to modulate. So the first thing I want to invite you to do is to notice. The second thing is self-regulation. With that, Daniel Goleman talks a lot about this ability to pause before we respond to stimuli, right? Lots is happening in our environment. There's so much going on at the university. So many of us are working in jobs where we're just super busy, right? And overwhelmingly so. And so it's hard to find those moments where you can just pause. But you'll have to figure out what that practice is. Sometimes I will just take just 5 minutes to pause and get myself centered, right? That helps me to be self-regulated, because when we're so overrun with emotions and just overstimulated, it is difficult to get access to our thinking brain to produce the best responses, right? And so sometimes we just need just a minute. And that's something that we can give to each other, right? That's where that grace abounds. The third thing is motivation. And so with motivation, I think of, how do I break things down into smaller pieces, right? So that I can actually make some headway here? Or how do I break things up so I can prioritize? And that also is helpful for my colleagues. So we're still talking about relationships, but we have to get ourselves together so that we can help, others, and be this mutually beneficial exchange, right? Even on the airplane, it says kind of put your mask on first. And so I think about that with motivation. It's how I break down tasks. Sometimes I talk about eating a pizza, like, because I like pizza. But when it comes out and it's all hot and you're like, ooh, right? You just want to dig in, but you don't pick up the whole pizza, right? And start going for it. Well, I hope you don't. But you break that down piece by piece. You take your piece, right? And you gotta kind of manipulate that so that you can eat it. And so the same with our tasks. There's an abundance of things that need to get done. And I may need to collaborate with this person. I might have to, or get a chance to collaborate with this person. But I've got to break down those tasks. I'm a big list maker. Did you imagine that already? I like to check off on the to-do list. The fourth thing is empathy. And that's where we switch to those external facing competencies. And this is where we think about, how do we show up and we just listen. There's a trend out on a famous social media site called TikTok. And it says, we listen and we don't judge, right? You may have heard of that. But all jesting aside, is how do we show up and just be present with each other and listen? Sometimes folks, right, our colleagues don't need us to help them solve something. Sometimes they just need a sounding board. And so, how do you show up um, as that person without any advice, without any judgment, but just listening? I think about times when colleagues have done that for me. It's like I just need to get it outside of myself to help me think through and help me strategize. And that really starts to build and forge other relationships, right? That can emerge when we're listening. And then number 5 is social skills. Um, and with social skills, it really boils down to how we engage. So the empathy was talking about how we show up and how we listen, how we're present with others. And then social skills is like, how do we engage? Sometimes we look like, oh, well, we don't have really strong relationships. But when you look back, you've not invested in any relationships either. And so, in order to have strong relationships, my grandmother would say to me that you have to sow there before you can grow there, right? Like in farming or harvesting type of analogy. But if you've not planted anything, how do you expect to get a harvest, right? How do you expect to have that relationship? Um, if you don't deposit any money in the bank, then you can't use your debit card, right? Like you've got like this banking analogy works there well as well. When we're thinking about relationships, it's like that. It's how do you continue to deposit in others? Because at times we're going to need to make a withdrawal. We're going to need folks. And so I encourage us to think about how we show up before we even get to the skills of strong relationship building. So we've got to kind of make sure that we're working with ourselves. Um, there's a best practice overall when we're thinking about high performing teams and things that they do, and they've been modeled over time. And one of the best practices, or a couple of the best practices, is that we model clarity, transparency, and follow through. And it shows up in these ways. And I love that in the chat, y'all already put a lot of these things, right? The first is communication, and we're going to spend some time talking about communication and conflict, CNC communication. And key to navigating communication and navigating conflict is trust and respect. If you don't have the basis of trust and respect, conflict and communication are going to go sideways every time. And so, how do we continue to build on that foundation of trust and respect? Well, there's 2 other keys here that don't often show up in these conversations, and it's accountability and boundaries. You build trust and respect with your colleagues when they know they can count on you to do your part. Like, I don't need you to do my job. I just need you to do yours, right? And I need to be able to rely on the fact that you're going to have your piece together. There's going to be times where all of us, right, may have missed something, but that shouldn't be what my colleagues expect of me. My colleagues should be able to expect that I'm going to show up and do what I said that I was going to do, that I'm integral about those things. That's accountability, right? And that's not something that others enforce. It really comes from your internal motivator, right? That accountability metric. And then that last piece on there is around boundaries. When you are being accountable and you are doing what you promised and delivering on your promise, then you can create those boundaries. And folks can respect those boundaries. right? One of my boundaries is that my family is together, and we go to our place of worship, and then we have a family day on Sunday. And so I do not work on Sundays. And so that's a boundary for me. But I show up in other arenas at other times, in ways in which I should, so that I can hold my boundary, if that makes sense. I'm going to keep moving on. And this is a discussion piece. So I really want us to talk for a bit. What do you do when you experience conflict in communication? What do you do? Okay. Thank you for your honesty. You withdraw. What else? Ask questions, try to get clarification. I think I also saw shut down. Maybe get defensive. Disengage or redirect. Get angry. Self-reflect. Things are moving quickly. I might have missed something. Listen, understand, get frustrated, ask to reschedule. Oh, I love that. Ask to reschedule the conversation, try to confront it. Mhm. Yeah, so you all are these are really good. They're honest in the way that we may show up. We have a list of things that we hope to do, right? Like we know all of the things, but to show up and admit, like, hey, when conflict shows up, I get defensive, or I want to withdraw, or I want to pull back, especially at work, right? You're like, oh, I don't know if this is something I want to engage in, but let's be real. Conflict happens. But I want to encourage you. Some of you were already on the right track. We don't shy away from conflict. It can be really hard. It can feel really um, vulnerable. I love this, like feelings of sadness about mistakes being made. Yes, I have been in those spaces where you have to enter this space and it's very vulnerable, right? But not shying away helps us build. Remember, we're trying to put these building blocks on top of each other with trust. And this really helps us to build that foundation of trust. When we don't shy away from it, we're not audacious about it, but we seek understanding. Like, help me understand, help me understand, so we can do something differently the next time, right? So you don't have to shy away from it. Something you can do is recognize triggers, your own and another person's. If you've worked with someone long enough, you know, you're like, oh, if I say this, Lauren's gonna feel this way, right? Like you work with folks long enough to know what those triggers might be, or you might step on it while you're in conversation, right? Might be like a landmine. And then you'll note that for next time, like and you'll be able to explain your way through that. There are definitely patterns of behaviors at work. Yes, they're observable. People are giving us so much information about the way they work and what works best. Um, you can do that by observing, but folks talk about it as well with what works for them. So recognizing triggers and then remembering to pause before you respond to stimuli is so crucial when we're thinking about conflict, is remembering to pause and remembering that old saying, maybe that your mother taught you, that just because you think it doesn't mean you have to say it. Do you remember that? You can think a lot of thoughts, but you don't have to say a lot of your thoughts. Um, so those two, and then controlling your expressions. If you're someone like me, who is very expressive facially, I have to be mindful of that. I'm realizing that my colleagues actually pay a lot of attention to my face in meetings. I might, raise my eyebrows or, you know, and so I have to make sure that I control that. So that's not communicating um, maybe things prematurely, right? I might have a visceral response to something, but can I control my expressions, right? So that's one thing. And then I love this. Y'all already, yeah, poker face. I would try, Michelle. I've been trying. Be curious. It's okay to call out tension. And I love that. Some of you mentioned that. You ask questions. I will ask, are we okay? Did I do something, or did I say something that may have offended you? And it's okay to ask that, right? Especially from that place of curiosity. You're not doing it from a disapproving thing, like you're acting really weird. What the heck is going on? Right? Like that's not the best lead in. But to go ahead and say, hey, I'm concerned. It the last meeting, it felt like something was off. It could just be me, giving that person an out because maybe they don't want, and you can say, we don't have to talk about it right now. If you want to plan a time, I'd love to, maybe we can go to coffee and talk about it. When you truly want to invest, that was a word that showed up in the chat, was around this level of investment. Well, how do you make that? These are moments where you make that investment. When you feel like there's some tension and you can just call it out. Otherwise, if we don't, it continues to build. And then other aggravations will happen. And sometimes you or others can become what's called like grievance collectors. Have you ever done that? Like, oh, I'm not going to address it this time. Oh, here they go. They're doing it again. And I put that in my little collection box. Oh, that they're doing it again, or they do something else. Right. And then all before I know it, I've got this like big old cup of grievance. So by the time they ask me, what's going on, or by the time we approach it, it's this big old thing that I have to address versus one minor thing. So hard to not hold on to that resentment. It is true, but it is easier to address little by little versus collecting it in total. And what I realize about anger or resentment is that you're often hurting you. That's not what you're doing to others. So forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, and others benefit from it. What are my thoughts on power differentials and conflict in communication? That is a great question. Um, I think some of my thoughts are, um, even with my even with my boss, if there is tension, I will call it out. I will not call it out in a disrespectful way, but I will get curious about it. I will say, and it is vulnerable. I might say something just like that. Are we good? Was there a misstep? I feel like something's off, or sometimes I have to just pause and say, hey, what is going on at this particular time that might be causing this action, right? So constantly weighing those things. I thought I saw another question. Hi, Lauren, please help me.
Yes. Susan Mello, thank you, Susan, for your question. Are there different words or ways to ask about conflict when it's a supervisor-employee relationship versus maybe personal?
Yeah. So again, with curiosity, and really utilizing, I think it's more about tone than it is like whatever your natural word selection. Like with my boss, because she's been my boss for 17 years. I just might say, hey, are we good? Or can we talk for a bit? Right? Like I might do that. But it depends on your relationship, the words you use. But asking, are we okay? Or did I do something to offend because something feels off? I think goes across the line, across all gamuts from colleagues to supervisors, I would use. All right. So let's explore some scenarios that produce clashes in the workplace. So what are some scenarios? And I'll give you some things that you might want to try. But what are some scenarios that produce clashes in the workplace? When do we kind of get into it? Let's see if I can see the chat. When we can't agree. Uh-huh. Ooh, that's a good one. When we can't agree on who's supposed to do what. That is a really big one that comes up is because we're not sure who's on first. And that's a exciting one because everyone's willing, but we didn't have any structure, right? And so that's a matter of just getting some structure. Workload inequity or even presumed workload inequity can cause some workplace clashes. Critique or critical feedback, absolutely, especially if I'm a little vulnerable, I'm not ready for it. When someone doesn't do a task that we need on schedule and now we're behind. Yeah, flexibility on working remotely versus in the office. Y'all are on it. Passive aggressiveness. Oh yeah. Um, or aggressiveness. Disrespectful for subject matter experts. And the list goes on. You can continue to get those out over there. But a few things I want to mention to try before we switch to inclusive workplace, and I want to give you some other things to think about. I know that we've got a bit more time here. You want to try to name the issue, right? If you're going to confront it, you want to try to name the issue, express what your need is, and then find some common ground. And you can do that through a number of strategies. One that I will often use is situation, behavior, impact. Talking about, kind of what happened in a non-judgmental way. We were in a meeting. These are just the facts. I'm just reporting the news, right? And this was the behavior I observed, so I can take it outside of them, right? And then I'll say, this is the impact. This is how I felt about that situation, and I really just wanted to talk about it a little bit. I understand. This is my POV, right? That's my point of view, but there might be another point of view that we need to talk through, right? So again, approaching instances with a lot of curiosity typically gives us what we need to make it further down the road, right? It gives us that ability and continues to build on trust and respect when we're approaching with curiosity. But we don't need to be afraid to name it, right? In our team meeting the other day, we were all supposed to be giving ideas, and each time I got ready to contribute, I was cut off by other, by you and others as well in the meeting. And it made me feel like my ideas or my contributions weren't valued or even needed in that space. And so before I, went further down the road with those thoughts, I just wanted to talk about it. And if I need to show up differently, please help me to see that. But I wanted to talk about it, right? So that's just kind of naming the issue, expressing what my need was, and looking for a space of common ground. And someone could say, "Oh, yeah, you're like," they're probably not going to come out and say, "Oh, your ideas, they were horrible. So we just wanted to, put you out of your misery and keep going," right? Like that's typically not what the response will be. The response might be something like, "Oh no, your ideas were so good." And then that made me think of other things. And I thought it was a springboard. I thought we were just, kind of riffing, right? You might hear something like that. And then you're like, "Oh, okay, it wasn't that person's intention." We don't know what their intention was, but we know that the impact was. But talking about it helps us to get it out and to get to a basis of trust and respect. So I want to switch topics here really quickly, or not switch topics, but continue in our topic, but focus more on inclusive workplace. What's one small inclusive action a colleague has done that really made you feel valued? Can you name one or two? One small inclusive action that a colleague has done that made you feel valued. Yes, ask for your input. Stopping by your desk to see how your weekend went, showing some appreciation. Yes, sending a thank you note. Yeah, those positive notes. Oh, I love this. Reminding people how to say your name. Yeah, I'm Ujima, and I've been called Wilma since I've been here. I don't know how they got a W, but yeah, it's really nice when you're called. Oh, nominated. Congratulations for a Distinguished Staff Award. Maybe when they offered to help you. Oh, that's really nice. Telling you they were glad you were back from leave, thanking you publicly, acknowledging good work, asking about your origin, giving a pleasant good morning to start the day. These are all really great. So when you think about things that people do, small things to make you feel valued, I want to put the shoe on the other foot and ask you, what do you do to make your colleagues feel valued and respected? Because see, we have to be intentional about that. We have to know what it is we specifically do. You check in to see how they're doing. Yes, that's great. What else? What else do you do? Stop by their office to say good morning, give praise when it's due, welcome them into meetings, thank them publicly, offer support, ask for their opinions. So a lot of the same and similar behaviors that you value, you give to others. I love that. Being collaborative. Have you ever thought to ask your colleagues what makes them feel valued or supported? Um, that's one way. Instead of just giving them what it is that kind of fills your bucket, maybe asking what might fill theirs is a good idea as well. When we seek to really get to know someone and we make those personal connections with them, it goes a long way, right? It's like giving someone flowers who really just wanted chocolates, or giving someone chocolates who really just wanted flowers, right? recognizing their life milestones, absolutely celebrating milestones and wins. Some people don't like to celebrate their birthdays, but knowing that, right? Going out to coffee with them, right? So you have all of these activities that you can do that help folk feel respected. And I want to say part of that is, again, being intentional and not accidental, but knowing exactly what, like today, I'm going to go in and I want to make connections with 3 people today and being really intentional about what that might look like, right? So some inclusive micro behaviors. I'm going to give you some different language. We talk about micro kindnesses or micro affirmations. Y'all have heard of those things, right? So some micro inclusive behaviors is inclusive communication. And you bet, you guessed it. Using folks' correct names and their correct pronouns is super important, right? Our names are foundational to our identity. And so making sure that we get that piece correct goes a long way. Avoid interrupting, allowing people to finish their thoughts. And I know for folks that are expressive like I am, it is tough. You can see me on the Zoom. I'm almost like double Dutch. Do you remember double Dutch where you're like, can't wait to get in there, right? Like rocking back and forth. People can see it. But allowing folks to finish really goes a long way. Pausing to invite input from quieter or less dominant voices when we're in group settings, making sure that all voices are heard, and avoiding jargon and acronyms, which is super tough around here, because people might feel excluded if they're unfamiliar with what you're talking about. Acknowledge and validate. You all mentioned some of these things in your comments, right? Greeting colleagues, actually saying hello, and even saying goodnight, right? When you're leaving, acknowledging contributions, saying that's a great point. Thanks for raising it. And not taking credit when it doesn't belong to you, but crediting ideas properly. Maybe folks didn't hear it when my colleague Daisy, indicated something, and so I'm like, oh well, Daisy, thank you for mentioning this earlier. I just wanted to underscore kind of what you were saying. Do you want to take it further? Now that we're here, right? So making sure that people aren't feeling overlooked. Accessibility considerations are super important as well. Sometimes we don't think of what people might need in certain instances. But sharing agendas and materials in advance really can help people prepare. Maybe they're not, really good extemporaneous speakers. They need a moment to prepare themselves. And so thinking about how they have time and that they can prepare, asking everyone if they can access digital platforms or resources specifically if you're going to be sharing those things. Using captions in virtual meetings can help a lot of folks. Some folks are, even if they don't have an auditory, they may be audiovisual folk, and it might help them with their comprehension. So thinking of those things, and then offering multiple ways for folks to engage. I know that we are a highly, you know, like a performative talking can be our mode of being able to interact or show participation. But being able to utilize the chat and engage that way is important as well. Another is psychological safety. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for somebody let me know that my Teams chat keeps popping up in my share screen. I don't even know how to turn it off, but hopefully we'll navigate through. Psychological safety, admitting when you don't know something or when you make a mistake is so huge. We talk about that bank, right, of idea, that banking idea with our relationships on trust and respect. Um, just it's okay for you to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I can get it, right? Um, Responding supportively when others raise concerns or feedback is super important as well. Letting folks know that you recognize what it is that they're saying, you acknowledge, you see it, you hear it, and you're going to take it further. How do you take it into consideration? I'm really thanking others for their honesty. Sometimes it isn't things you want to hear, but saying, I really appreciate you bringing this to my attention, and I know it was difficult to address, can be important. Um, and then creating space for disengagement or disagreement, not disengagement, but disagreement without judgment. Like we may not agree on these things, but that's okay. It's not necessary, right, for our relationship going forward. So there is a lot in the inclusive micro behaviors, and I don't know if we're giving these presentations, but totally can share my notes with you. But as I get ready, how much more time do I have? Is it 15 minutes?
We have right till 11:45. Yep, so up to you.
Look,
It's so great though.
speed,
It's amazing.
speeding through. So before I get to my final tips and takeaways, I want to pause there, because I know I went through those the inclusive micro behaviors um, quite fast. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about or share some of the inclusive micro behaviors. You started that really good list, but I'd love to hear more once now you've seen what I've talked about. But I think I saw something pop up in the chat. What do you say? When do you approach someone on how they came across to you and they say, you are just too sensitive, don't take it personally? Being dismissive to someone's feelings, yeah, that's really tough, right? When you've been vulnerable and you go to someone and then they dismiss it. One of the things I would say is if you're feeling up to it in that moment, like if you got to do your own internal check, like, do I have enough resources of what I need to take it a step further? You can say, I really appreciate you thinking about this and talking with me. And at this point, I feel a little dismissed by our interaction. And so maybe there's a different time that we can come together. Um, but I really want to be in a place where you can hear, um, how this interaction impacted me. Right. And so just reiterating what it is that bothered you about the exchange or the communication, but also recognizing that that person can say, this isn't a good time for me. Can we talk about this later? That's fine, but schedule the time so that you can talk about it later. Don't just let it fester. What are tips for handling when someone mispronounces your last name? Oh, all, all you need to do is say, I really appreciate your attempt to get my name right. It really means a lot to me. But let me help you. Here's how to say that, right? That's one of the ways that I will say that. I'll tell folks all the time, when I'm called Regina, um, I will say something like, oh, Regina's my friend, not me. But I appreciate that you attempted to say my name. My name is actually Ujima. It's pronounced Ujima. And so, and depending upon who they are, like when I'm when I work with kids, I might say, ooh, a way to think about my name is say, ooh, Ujima, right? Like, so there are different ways to engage. Sometimes using humor can be helpful, but often I will say, thank you for your attempt at that. And then, through Workday, we've got a lot of new tools now that help our colleagues be able to say our names, right? We've got that new pronunciation tool that can be helpful. Positivity is key. Yeah, yeah. Because sometimes I think when we think about conflict or those types of things, we think it has to be contentious or we already have a negative feeling about it. And it doesn't have to be that, but sometimes people do make it that, and I understand. I have been in workplace conflict situations that have really just made me feel overcome. And like I couldn't really say anything, right? And in those instances, you want to take a beat, regroup, get around people who remind you, right, who you are and those kinds of things. And then you look for opportunities to approach. What else? What other questions do you have? We can stay in inclusive micro behaviors, or we can even go back to conflict. What other things are coming up? I think I've seen everything in the chat. Just want to make sure. I have a hand. Yes, hi, Anna.
Hey, Ujima, thanks. Yeah, one of my questions is sometimes I find I get a little like overstimulated or overwhelmed when I'm trying to focus on stuff, and there's lots of like community happening around me, which is not necessarily more my own issue with that, right? So how do you kind of like carve out that focus space for yourself while also not impacting, your team dynamics, or you don't always want to be that person who's like, can you stop talking? But if you don't have an office, right, you don't have somewhere to go. So
Right. So sometimes I will even just remove myself for a moment. It just depends. I mean, I think that if it's something that's continual on the team, then you want to talk about some team norms, right? And our team norms really help us to govern and guide our interactions and saying, maybe from the hours of 10 a.m. to 11:30 or 10 to 12, we're going to have some quiet. We need to have some quiet time because we're in meetings and we need to do some focused work. And, but in the afternoons, maybe that's a time where we need to be more lively, right? Or what have you. So team norms can be really successful. Outside of team norms, I would say looking for spaces within your building that are great focus spaces for you, or even planning to do your focused activities when you're maybe doing your telework day or things of that nature can be helpful. I think I have to pull up the chat.
Hey, Ujima, I have a question for you. How do you, as a leader at University of Washington, how do you set healthy boundaries, both maybe within your unit, but also, part of your bio is you're definitely well connected and needed, and I'm sure you get a lot of asks. So how do you, as a leader, set healthy boundaries?
So one of the things for me is that I really like one of my mottos, right, is that I like to position people for success. So it's really difficult for me to say no to folks. Like even while we were talking, I'm sure people saw my chat pop up, and folks are asking questions or needing time or those kinds of things. And so the boundary that I set for myself is, it's actually a time boundary. that from this time to this time, I will respond, I am available, and I will set time. But I use my calendar, Lauren, quite a bit to help give me the time that I need to work on different tasks. So my calendar really tells me what to do and when to do it. And I am really regimented. So I will carve out time on my calendar to plan for things or to create content or curriculum or to have, right, some think time for myself. And I actually color code it so that I know just by the code. Like when it's red, I know red means I'm teaching. People know they can't schedule over that. I know my mind is shifted. When it's green, that means I'm in a meeting. That's what that means, right? So I've got this whole when it's purple, I'm out. I'm out and about. So those are different ways with which I kind of help myself. Yeah. Was there another question in the chat before I go to my final slide?
Yes. Autumn is asking, thanks Autumn for your question. What do you do when someone wants or needs to talk about it too much? Like, I'm done already.
Yeah, that's a good one because sometimes folks can have some just lingering things. And so I might say something like, thank you. Like, thanks, Autumn. We've talked about this a couple of times now. And I really thought I left the conversation thinking that we were at a resolution point, but it doesn't appear that way. And so I want to ask so that we can really put this conversation away and move forward with our relationship. What is it that is really the issue that we can address, and then we can move forward, right? So maybe boiling down to that next point. Another way you can handle that is bringing in a third party that might be your supervisor, right? Or if it's with your supervisor, maybe it's your human resources consultant that you need to get some advice. Like we've tried and we haven't really gotten where we needed to be. And so, and I can acknowledge that. I don't feel that way, but if my colleague feels that way, then let's give this one last final. It's my last, best, and final, right? Kind of offer around that. And then if you've done that and the person still comes back, you can remind them, hey, oh, we already addressed this. And I'm really glad you brought it back up because it gives us an opportunity to think again about what we agreed to, our agreements. These were our agreements. Okay. I'll have some really great questions. So I want to share my kind of final tips and takeaways. The first thing is that I want to remind you to just be mindful. Watch yourself and others. We started with that idea of kind of reading the room, right? Watch yourself and watch others. The substrata of every relationship is us. So we want to make sure, and I get it. Like my family tells me when I walk in the room, I can shift the energy. And I'm mindful of my energy, right? So I try to watch that. The second thing, if we're going downward the screen here, is practice presence. Be present in every moment. Like, try not to be distracted. We know we have so many like silly Teams is going off all the time, or your phone might be demanding. But when you schedule time, be in that time. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to have coffee with my son, my grown son, and I haven't seen him in a little while because he's just been working so much. And he came here out by UW to have coffee, and I was in a meeting, and my meeting was running over, and I had to say, y'all, I need to go. I have an appointment. And in that meeting, I could hear my team's messages go off, and it was like, I just want to, but I was like, you know what? He deserves this moment. And we were only together for just a moment, right? And so being present in every moment, I encourage you to practice. And then being curious, listening, and asking for feedback. And that's hard because we don't know what's going to come back in the feedback. And sometimes people's assessment may be different than your own. And so that can be difficult and vulnerable, but being available for it. And the last thing I'll offer is slow down. Just slow down and pause before you respond to stimuli. Sometimes we're acting and behaving in ways that we don't even need to. Like, it's not necessary. Nobody's requiring this of us. Like the other day, I made a joke around here. I was like, oh, I should be wearing skates so I can get around here faster and get to all the things. And I was like, that is like, why? Why do I need to do that? I'm perfectly fine with the pace that I am walking and getting to things. And if that means that I might get to a meeting 1 minute late, you know what I've discovered? Everybody lived. Everybody lived to see the next day, right? So I want to encourage you to slow down, and take those moments. And that's how we invest in these healthy relationships. They're built on interactions, one interaction at a time. I invite you to commit to one of those micro inclusive moments at work this week. And thank you, Lauren, and the whole you for inviting me to share. I hope that something I said was helpful to you as you continue to invest in creating healthy relationships at work.
Absolutely. We actually have a couple more questions.
Do I?
Yeah. What about dealing with truly bad actors? For example, people who are intentionally trying to damage your reputation or disparage your work. It's a
Oh
great.
my word. You all, these questions are so good. And it is very difficult to see your way through. So getting a trusted advisor, if that is your supervisor for you, then great. It could be someone else across the university that you trust. Talking to the ombud can be helpful to think through strategies. Also talking to your human resources consultant. It depends on the angle of that annoyance or intentional sabotage. Is it around what are the reasons why, right? Is it something that's a protected class that you need to go to the office formerly known as UCERO? I often mess up their name now. So there are many different resources and avenues depending upon the nature or the source of that. It makes it difficult to give just one space, but seeking out a resource to really help you kind of navigate through. People will tell you, continue to do good work though, while all in the midst of this happening. Don't fall into, you don't have to give in to what others are saying. Just continue to put good work in the world. But I know it's hard. I've been there.
What about Ujima? What about, maybe like before January 20th or just in the climate now at the University of Washington and within UW Medicine, it's challenging times. People are struggling. What is your advice on when maybe, how do you continue to cultivate healthy relationships when you're struggling or we're all going through it. We're going through it together. But how do you kind of keep those relationships strong at the same time as maybe being vulnerable or angry or anxious or
Yeah. And that's when we need each other most, right? It's really looking for those individuals that bring you strength and bring you joy. And it's okay for you to lean into joy when things are going wrong. It's reminding yourself, it's a gratitude practice, right? One of the things I'll spotlight one of the leaders that has truly been helpful for me at this university. It's Ricky Hall. Dr. Ricky Hall, even in our meetings, he makes space, after our land acknowledgement and things of that nature, he will make space for our gratitude practice. And it's like no brainer that it's a way to get us to pause and slow down and remember why we're here. What are we tied to? What is it that we're doing? What are we grateful for? And so I think in these moments, that matters so much. And it's the easiest thing for us to forget is to remain connected and to stay in community, because that was one of the first things that came up in the chat. What do you do when these things that we withdraw? But it's
Right.
the time that we need each other the most.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments, reflection, maybe something that has resonated with you from the discussion, or even, inspiration from you all of how do you cultivate healthy relationships at work? Or do you have a success story you want to talk about? Or is it lunchtime?
I know, I know. It's like, I feel like I'm getting close to lunchtime, so.
Check. And feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah, lots of thank yous, Ujima.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, we're going to close and give you a little, pizza. As soon as you talked about pizza, I'm like, oh, the hot pizza.
I'm
Sounds
so sorry, you all.
That's great. Great. In fact, I think we have leftovers from yesterday.
I do want to ask you all to remember to think about what's one thing you can do differently starting today, right? Like, I just wanted to leave you with that, because I started the presentation talking about that right? We are the substrata of every relationship is us. And so thinking about what can I give differently? What do I plant, right, in this garden to get those seeds? How do I sow there before I can grow there? That's so important that you think about that as you get ready to have your pizza. I'm going to have some salad, but I'm going to be thinking of pizza every bite.
Get that fiber. So awesome. I
Thank
definitely love
you.
the pause. The pause is something that I need to do better.
Yeah,
Pause in the response, pause in the meetings.
that's right.
Oh, falafel salad. Nice.
Yeah. And not everything needs a response,
Right.
right? I am so learning that is that sometimes folks need to get things out and they don't. It's in the room. It doesn't actually need a
Yeah.
response. And so learning when I need to actually respond is so important.
Yeah, the faculty wellness roundtable earlier today, they did talk about kind of that expectation of this immediate response
Mhm.
that can be definitely distracting when you're trying to have your like work time or even in a meeting, but you can't be present because you're getting dinged, or that feeling that you have to respond to the partner or colleague across campus.
Mhm.
Great to have that boundary or just that expectation that it doesn't need to have a response right away.
That's right. Everything is not immediate, but
Oh,
teaching
then you can
ourselves, yeah, but teaching ourselves that is so difficult because we've now kind of given ourselves that rhythm that it's like whack-a-mole. It pops up, we ding it. It pops up, we ding it, like, and so we've got to get ourselves out of that practice, but it is hard,
very hard. Or if
right?
you don't get the response back, right? Because then when
It's
you
like, yeah,
turn it
we
away and
start
then
to
you
make
don't
up
get the
stories.
response back, You make up stories in your head. That person's bad, that person doesn't want a partner, you know. Yeah, yeah, it definitely is real. Well, thank you again, everyone. This has been great. So we're going to take a lunch break. So feel free